Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 76 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by The Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half. You can give me a follow on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great. It's funny. On the day of the first Sixers game of the year and the day of Game 1 of the NLCS, this is a funny behind the inside baseball story for the listeners out there. Initially, Shane hit me up because we usually do our podcast at 9 o'clock on Tuesdays, or in that vicinity. And I was like, we might want to change today. There's a couple things going on in Philadelphia sports, and I know Shane is strictly Eagles focused. So this is like the WNBA to Shane. It might as well not be on TV, the Phillies and the Sixers. But I had to, for the sake of the Chalk Talk listeners, I had to move it up so people will still be in the mood to hear about the Eagles before we get to the other Philly sports.
I stand by my take that every last one of you, are cheating on the one true sport, football, with all these other meaningless things. And one day you might recognize the error of your ways.
I'll just say real quick, and we'll get into this a little bit more. Does football kind of stink? Is this the wrong podcast to ask that question? Does the NFL kind of stink? That's what we're going to find out on this podcast today.
Tom Brady says it does. I mean, Tom Brady said there's a lot of bad football, and I'm here to point the finger and say he's part of it. But Mark, we've got to lead off with this. You mentioned does football kind of stink? What has happened to offenses in the NFL? This week, there's 14 games. It's the first week of the bye. Maybe this show won't be an hour and a half this week. So there's 14 games instead of 16. 8 of the 14 winning quarterbacks were under 200 yards. Carson Wentz threw for 99 yards in a win. Jalen Hurts, 155. Marcus Mariota, 129. Zach Wilson, 110. Kirk Cousins, 175. Daniel Jones, 173. Geno Smith, 197. Mitch Trubisky threw for 144, although maybe that one's cheating, because if you add in Kenny Pickett's yards, they threw for 211 as a team. But do offenses just stink? What is happening in the NFL right now?
It's really hard to figure out. Is it that teams have seen ball control offenses be successful, and you go with kind of almost the game manager, run the ball, manage the clock offense? Or is it just that quarterback play is worse right now than we've seen in a long time? Or is it that offensive line play is worse right now than we've seen in some time? Because I feel like every single team has offensive linemen hurt, and it's for a lot of them, it's multiple. Maybe that happens every year, and obviously O-linemen are almost at more injury risk than the rest of the field due to the nature of what they do for a living. There's going to be a lot of injuries in the trenches on the offensive and defensive lines. But this year, it has felt like, especially maybe for top teams too, like we've seen it with Trent Williams in San Fran. We've seen O-line issues with the Rams. Obviously, the Bengals, who made the Super Bowl last year. There's been a lot of the top teams that either we expect to compete or went to the Super Bowl last year, and those offensive lines have not held up their ends of the bargain. Is it that one aspect of it is impacting everything, league-wide? My opinion is that it's probably a little bit of everything. It's probably a little bit of quarterback play being worse, a little bit of more offensive line injuries than usual, and probably just smarter defenses and teams that are doing a better job game planning for the offense than for the defense. There's so many factors that can go into it, and obviously each team is a case-by-case basis, but there's a lot of case-by-case bases to discuss because there's a lot of offenses that don't look like 2022 modern NFL offenses. I mean, I watch college football every Saturday. I love college football. It's probably my second favorite sport behind the NFL. I just haven't felt there be such a marked drop-off from the play in college football last year to this year in the way that I do feel that way about the NFL. I absolutely feel like the product is much worse this season.
Yeah, part of it is the NFL is cyclical in nature. defenses got bigger and stacked the box to stop the run, so offenses got faster and spread out, and you had explosive plays. And now defenses are getting smaller and faster, and they're playing light boxes, and they're playing too high safeties, and they're not allowing explosive plays. And so offenses are pivoting back to running the football. But man, the games are just not there. Don't get me wrong, it's still fun to watch. They just seem a lot more sloppy. Part of it's probably injuries, like you talked about. Part of it's probably just these awful primetime games that keep getting forced on us. But it's definitely been a weird feel in the NFL so far this year.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, we're gonna outline that when we go through some of these games, and it's just like there used to be good teams. Like, we're gonna talk about one in Philadelphia, and there used to be bad teams. It just feels like instead of there being 6 to 10 really good teams like there are every year, and then 5 to 10 really bad teams, and then you have the 20 plus in the middle of teams that can get, depending on the week, can trend towards good, can trend towards bad, or can trend towards exactly in the middle. It doesn't feel like that right now. It feels like there's like 3 good teams and like 2 really bad teams, and then it's just everything else in the. I mean, New York football is like a perfect example of that. Like, the Giants are 5-1. Are they a really good team? Are they someone that I'm going to throw in a basket of teams that I think can compete for a Super Bowl? No, not at all. So there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of these records that you almost have to be like, yeah, but this. Like, there's just a lot of weird stuff going on in the NFL right now. Maybe it's week 6 and that these kind of things will play themselves out. Maybe the Giants will lose a couple in a row. The Packers or the Bucks or the 49ers or the Rams or any of these teams that we expected to be much better will win a few in a row and, string together a hot streak like we saw with the Rams last year. The Rams kind of struggled. I think they went a month at one point, October and November, without a win, and then ended up going on a little bit of a hot streak. Maybe we see that a lot. Maybe we see teams put it together in the second half. But right now, I'd be hard-pressed to find more than 5 or 6 teams that I think are realistic Super Bowl options.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and dive into some of these teams. And let's start, as we always do, with the Eagles getting the key Sunday Night Football victory over the Cowboys, 26-17. We've seen this cycle play out, it seems like, in all of their games this year. They were up 20-0, and then they give up a big kick return. You get the bad special teams play. It sets up a field goal, sets up struggling in the second half. Now, you could explain some of that with Lane Johnson leaving the game with, I don't know if he had a concussion or it was just concussion protocol. I'm not 100% sure. I know the league's playing very cautiously with that, but
yeah.
He was removed from the game with concerns of a head injury, and the offense stalled after that. They only gained 21 yards in their first 2 drives of the second half, while Dallas scored on both to make it 17-20. Micah Parsons, 0 QB pressures in the first half. He had 2 pressures in the second half on 5 pass rushing snaps. So Lane Johnson going out makes a huge impact on the game. But as the Eagles do, they answer back with a 13-play, 75-yard touchdown drive. As the game is, it's in peril, you're freaking out, they eat 8 minutes off the clock and they score, and they end up putting the game away. Philadelphia is averaging 21 points per game in the first half this season. They're only averaging 5.8 in the second half, but they keep winning football games. The Eagles average more points in the second quarter this season than other NFC contenders like Dallas, Green Bay, and the Rams have in like the entire game. And that's just insane.
My first question for you about this game, because I saw a lot of people talking about this, and in the first half, they kind of just let Parsons free run a little bit. They kind of just didn't really do anything to block Parsons, and they would throw it to the area that he was expected to be if he wasn't free rushing there. What did you think overall of the game planning that they did for Parsons?
I thought it was really good, especially when you got into the second half. I'm going to have an all-22 video out tomorrow on this because I've got the clips cut up, but I haven't got to record it yet, that Jack Driscoll cannot block Micah Parsons. So just don't try. They did a lot of things. They left him unblocked on RPOs. They left him unblocked on under center, like play action bootlegs going his direction. they did a lot of things because they simply weren't going to be able to block him with Driscoll. They just didn't try. They left him unblocked, and they basically had Jalen Hurts account for him. And you forget what it looks like to see defensive ends really attack upfield, but then you see like Josh Sweat do it on a handoff on 3rd and short on the Cowboys because he doesn't have to worry about Cooper Rush in the run game. And that's just what a mobile quarterback brings to you. It raises the floor of your offense so much just to have a mobile guy under center.
Yeah, I mean, and we say that all the time about Jalen, and we were saying that before last season. We were saying it before last season how high the Eagles' floor was because of what Jalen brings you in the mobility department. And you said something there where you basically had Jalen Hurts account for Micah Parsons. That alone, like that sentence alone, tells you the value that Jalen Hurts has. And obviously we said his passing yards obviously leave a lot to be desired in this game. And I think he's had passing touchdowns in 3 of their 6 games. So there's actually been 3 of the 6 games that he hasn't even had a passing touchdown. Having said all of that, I think he's the MVP right now. Like, I think he is the most valuable player in the NFL right now, which is pretty shocking to say when we're talking about a guy who, honestly, neither of us were more than 50% convinced would be the guy going forward. Honestly, neither of us were more than 50% convinced he'd be the starter next year for the Eagles on week 1. So it's absolutely amazing to see the progression he's been taking. And I have kind of pumped the brakes a little bit on the MVP talk at times because I thought Lamar Jackson was playing exceptionally at one point. I thought Josh Allen was playing exceptionally at one point. Not that neither of them are. They both still are playing very well. But at this point, I think with the fact that the Eagles are 6-0 and with the play of the other guys maybe not being quite as superhuman as it was to start the year, I think there's a legitimate argument that the leading front runner for the MVP is the Philadelphia Eagles quarterback right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be him or Josh Allen. I put this clip up on Twitter. This is another one. This is just Jordan Mailata takes a terrible pass set here. He's instantly beaten off the snap of the ball. And for most quarterbacks, this is going to be a 7 to 10 yard sack. And Hurts is able, I mean, he gets out of the pocket and he throws it away. He turns a bad play into a neutral play. You get out of that situation. Your left tackle blows his pass set. It doesn't matter. It doesn't lead to a sack. Like, that's what Hurts brings to the table. And yeah, he's done so much for the offense. There's part of me that's waiting on like the other shoe to drop. The Eagles are so RPO-y, and it's worked so well. And yet you feel like it eventually, like there's going to come a point this season that a team stops that. And I'm really anxious to see what the Eagles like counter to the counterpunch is, because they haven't really had to go there yet. It's been a lot of the runs out of the RPOs, a lot of the RPO slant flat things. They haven't really had to get outside of that yet. And we know they can. They went vertical in the first couple weeks. I think they want to get back to that when they're not facing such a quick pass rush. But I'm anxious to see what they're able to do when they inevitably get in a game where the defense schemes that away from them.
Yeah, and I'm not saying Minnesota did scheme that away from them, because we came on here and said how bad that scheme was for Minnesota against Hurts. But there was times in that game where I felt like they were forcing Jalen to throw. They were doing the old let Jalen beat you at the arm. And in that game, that's really the only game I can point to where I felt like the defense did that at all. And in that game, he did. And we came on here the next day and saying that he did and that he did a great job there. Now, will a good defense that brings that philosophy, instead of Minnesota, who is probably middle of the pack — I haven't checked defensive rankings yet after last week's results, but I imagine they're somewhere in the middle on most defensive stats. But I would just say that once we get a legitimately good defense, try to employ some of the things Minnesota did defensively in terms of forcing Jalen to throw, or more so taking the Tampa Bay playoffs approach to the offense, which is harder to do now that you have A.J. Brown with Smith and Goddard. But still, I think he'll be able to get through that test simply by a nature of how good his offensive line is and simply by a nature of how good his weapons are. So while I'm saying all of this about him being an MVP in this scheme, a lot of it is obviously going to be just how incredible the environment is. And this is the ultimate test case for what a QB can look like in a system that is not catered to his, skills, which we saw in the first 6 to 7 games of last year, where they were kind of trying to jam a square peg into a round hole where Jalen was throwing the ball 50 times per game. I don't think people remember how crazy that was anymore. Like, we just weren't running the ball, and we were having a guy whose best skill is not like passing the ball to pass 60 times. But I think we've seen this is like the ultimate test case on that was what he looked like in this system, and this is what he looks like when you put a number one receiver around him, put maybe two number one receivers around him, put a top tier tight end, put a top notch O line that is another year developed, and keep him in the same system from year one to year two. It's like all of the things that you would want to do for a quarterback, like get him a good O-line, get him a legitimate weapon, get him a second and a third legitimate weapon, have their fourth weapon be really fast, keep him in the same system from year to year. It just feels like the Eagles as an organization have done everything right by Jalen Hurts. And we're going to talk, and that might sound pretty simple, like put talent around him, cater the system to his needs in terms of making it an offense that is designed well for a mobile quarterback. All of this sounds simple, yet there's so many coaches and organizations across the NFL, and we're going to talk about quite a few. I'm looking at you, Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona, that just refuse to either surround your quarterback, your young quarterback, with the right pieces. I'm looking at you, Chicago, or keep him in the same system and cater that system to them. It's just beautiful to see that it really does feel like they've gotten everything right with Jalen.
Yeah, I'm going to save my Cliff Kingsbury thing for later, but I'm going to get there. It really seems like the only weakness to this offense so far, the only chink in the armor, is how to handle the blitz. And I'm going to have an all-22 video out tomorrow on that too. I thought I saw them start to try to make some answers to blitzing against the Cowboys with limited success. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but I like that I saw that. A couple comments here. Quentin Moore on YouTube says, I thought the Cowboys would stop the RPO, but the Eagles added the sprint out with Brown. It can work if the play calling continues to evolve. I put out a video on that, actually, those exact plays today, that they were running those pistol scrape plays to Zach Pascal early. Weeks 1, week 2, they had key third downs against the Cowboys. In week 4, they didn't go into the pistol with Zach Pascal. Now it was the shotgun with A.J. Brown doing the same thing. They're mixing that personnel. They're mixing those formations to disguise that. And he says we need more downfield passing as well. And I think the Eagles do want to be more vertical. We're just coming off of back-to-back games. The Cardinals are blitz heavy. The Cowboys have a really, really, really good pass rusher, and he was going in this game against a backup offensive tackle. So I think they will get back to that after the bye. The matchups are sort of dictating that right now.
Yeah, and it's not just one good pass rusher. They've got DeMarcus Lawrence, too, on the other side. And overall, even outside of Parsons, have been a really good pass rush this year. So I do think that the RPO offense and the quick strike offense was the way to go against Dallas. And we saw it be obviously extremely effective at times. I have a little bugaboo that I just wanted to bring up. Can we stop putting Boston Scott on the field? Like, I get it. It's cute that he's been here for a decade. I know it's not a decade, but it feels like he's been here forever. It's cute. It's nice. We all love him. He's a giant killer. Save him for the Giants games. Like, he's 6 carries for 16 yards in this game, and every time he came on the field, I just kind of like groaned. Like, I was kind of like, ugh, like, really? We're doing the Boston Scott thing? Maybe it's because in the past I've been anti-Miles Sanders. Like, I have not been the biggest proponent of Miles Sanders. I think he's been fantastic this year. Like, I think he's taking what the defense is giving him. I think he's fighting for extra yards, and I think he's doing a lot less dancing, a lot less low IQ running. And I outside of that, I like what I'm seeing from Gainwell in the limited snaps that I'm seeing in this game. 5 for 25. I thought he was pretty consistent with his touches as well. It's not like that was one big rush and then the other 4 stunk. Every time I feel like I've seen Gainwell, I've been happier to see Gainwell than Scott. So where I'm at is we're probably not paying Miles Sanders anyway. Let's just, let's run him into the ground. Like, let's use Miles Sanders as much as possible. And when we're not using him, let's use Gainwell. That's a minor complaint, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Get Trey Sermon on the field.
That too.
But
that too. I'm there.
Hey, maybe they should just go trade multiple first-round picks for Christian McCaffrey in that fantasy land that is whatever Carolina's thinking right now. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw. I have a buddy who's been nonstop texting me like, "Oh, Christian McCaffrey, we got to bring him in." Would you give up a 3rd-round pick for Christian McCaffrey?
Probably.
I don't think I would.
Yeah, I would not go any higher. Because you're keeping him 1 year and then you're cutting that contract. It goes to $19 million next year, and I'm not paying him that. So, I don't know. Maybe a conditional third or a fourth. I'd definitely do a day 3 pick, maybe a conditional third or something, but I definitely wouldn't go any higher than that because it's a 1 year rental. Unless he's going to change that contract, which he's not.
No.
And he shouldn't. He shouldn't because he's played 10 games in the last 2 seasons. He's injury prone. He shouldn't redo his contract, so...
Well, that's more the reason that I wouldn't be interested in him even for a third-round pick. Like, I don't know how you could look yourself in the mirror, trade that third-round pick, and then in 2 weeks when he gets hurt, deal with it. Like, that would be such an obvious – I don't know.
If you have 2 injury-prone running backs, does that, like, combine to be, like, one non-injury-prone running back? Because maybe you just, like, put Christian McCaffrey and Miles Sanders together and you just feel like, hey, one of them will probably be healthy.
Calling Miles Sanders injury prone, if we're gonna call Christian McCaffrey injury prone, might not be fair. Because there's levels to this, as Meek Mill once said. Miles Sanders will miss a game or two, and he'll have like a hamstring issue. Christian McCaffrey, like, man, that guy, he doesn't play football. Just to close the door on that McCaffrey conversation, he's gonna be a Buffalo Bill, right?
He needs to be, but not for a first round pick. So
you look at the contenders. Like, this is kind of the conversation I was having on radio this week. You look at the contenders. Who needs a running back? Like, Green Bay's not trading for a running back. Minnesota's not trading for a running back. The Rams don't have picks. Shanahan's never going to trade assets for a running back. I don't think the Eagles are. The Chiefs,
they're liking what they see in Pacheco right now.
There's not a lot.
The Bills are where he should be, but not for a first round pick.
It's like Baltimore, like maybe Baltimore. Like I'm outside of Buffalo. Can you even think of a contender that makes sense?
The Ravens should trade for him and just make him a receiver. He would be the best receiver that Lamar Jackson has ever had.
Well, actually, the best receiver that Lamar Jackson has ever had signed there about an hour ago, and his name is Deshaun Jackson.
It's true. It's true.
Imagine he's just like Deshaun Jackson. Imagine he's just like, oh yeah, I'm my hamstrings are fine and I'm still fast.
Yeah, turns in 1,000 yards in that offense this season.
That'd be great.
Okay, anything else on the Eagles game before we move on?
No, I think we're good. I thought T.J. Edwards was awesome again.
Big bounce back game for him because he struggled last week.
He did. He has had awesome games though this year. Like I feel like he's either been wasn't he brutal in week 1 too? Am I correct there against Detroit?
He wasn't great. I don't think he was terrible week 1. Just the entire structure was pretty bad week 1. Last week against the Cardinals, they were spreading him out, putting Rondale Moore and Hollywood Brown in the slot, isolating them on linebacker, which isn't. I mean, that's a loss for any linebacker, but definitely for T.J. Edwards, whose specialty is not coverage. But this week, it was downhill attacking the run, which is what he's best at. And he's been good in coverage this year, too. But he got to play fully to his strengths on Sunday.
Yeah, because I remember in week 2, he had a great game against Minnesota, and people kind of said the same thing, kind of a little bit of a bounce back from week 1 for Edwards on how he looked in week 2. And I think that was the same thing this week. But he's been really impressive. And I guess one last conversation since we had it off air. The Chauncey Gardner-Johnson thing is interesting because if you listen to the media or like the local media, or you listen to the questions that they ask the coaches and the local media could not sound happier with the guy. And obviously he had this amazing performance this week with 2 interceptions. Obviously one not really his doing, but he was there and he caught the ball. So he had 2 interceptions, 2 huge plays in that game. Something that I thought was interesting, NBC when they do the Sunday Night Football intros for the offenses and defenses, they flash the PFF ranking underneath, which I'm pretty sure is because Collinsworth owns PFF. I wonder if that's why they're able to do that. But anyway, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was 76 out of 84 ranking among his position, which I thought was really surprising. I didn't think he'd been bad. I definitely didn't think by the eye test that he'd been bad. So I sent it over to Shane before the interceptions happened. And you were actually pretty negative on Gardner-Johnson going into the game.
Yeah, his tackling has been atrocious. And that's one of the big things that drags down his specifically his PFF grade. He hasn't been great in coverage. Now you see how it looks with him out and Kevon Wallace in, and you see what true atrocity is in both run defense, tackling, and coverage. He's never been the strongest tackler. He's a physical player, but he's never been the best like tackler. And so now it's just he's changing positions. Everything's a different angle at safety, and I think he's taken time there. And even you look at his 2 interceptions last night. One of them, the ball is deflected on a great play by James Bradbury. It pops right up to him. The other one, now Brandon Graham is in Cooper Rush's lap. Pressure hits him as he throws. It's underthrown and it gets picked. If there's no pressure, that's a touchdown if he's able to step into that throw. He had that throw down the sideline. But that's where your pass rush, your coverage, they cover for each other. So I don't think he's been fantastic in coverage. He has struggled in that transition, but he's an athlete. He's a good player. He's just bringing those instincts along. That's part of what makes me wonder how good this defense can be. If he starts to settle in as the season goes on, you can only assume he's going to get better as he's switching those positions. So I like him. I like the versatility. You saw him pressing the slot some. Having him gives you those abilities. But there's been some struggles along the way as he's tried to switch to safety.
And it seems like he's fit in extremely well from like a team standpoint. Like everyone is giving absolutely glowing comments, especially after this game where he's one of the stories of the game, whether it's luck or not. I know that it's not necessarily. This probably drives Shane crazy because it drives me crazy. When someone gets 2 picks or someone gets a pick, they become the story of the game instead of maybe the guy who more directly caused that pick, whether that be Bradbury on the first one or the pass rusher on the second one, obviously. So that's just how it goes. But everyone, all the beat reporters were asking players questions about CGJ, and they were all giving glowing answers about how he's already a leader in the clubhouse. And there was talk when we traded for him that he was a bit of a malcontent, and he's obviously had the past run-in with Michael Thomas. So there's been questions about him in terms of what he is in the locker room and what he brings off the field. It seems like the coaches and the players and the media are, in love with what he's brought to this organization. So at least he's fitting in that way. And I do think he's absolutely trending in the right direction, and he's going to be – I think he's a guy who's going to be here for a while. I think he's a guy that they're going to end up signing.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope it all works out. And if not, the Saints basically gave him away for free. So
yeah, we got him for nothing.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of awful primetime games, let's talk about very briefly, because this was a terrible game. But Thursday Night Football, Washington beats the Bears 12-7. The Bears were 0 of 3 in the red zone again. They're 2 for 8 in the last 3 weeks. The game comes down to Darnell Mooney, the best receiver that they have, which isn't saying much, running a 4th down route short of the sticks. Justin Fields puts the ball on him. He's tackled out of the end zone, and it ends the game. I don't know. The other side is Carson Wentz injures his finger. He's out 4 to 6 weeks, and honestly, I can't imagine that he will get the job back unless Taylor Heinicke is just terrible. But if this is the end of Carson Wentz as a starter, he will leave his starting role with the most wins without a loss in Thursday Night Football history at 7-0. So he can always cling to that.
Mr. Thursday Night. Yeah, it's crazy. That's unbelievable. I don't have much to say about this game. The Bears offense is a joke, and this is my little rant that I do every week when we talk about the Bears. What they did this offseason was so unfair to Justin Fields, who has become a punchline. Whether we like it or not, every time that the Bears play, you go on Twitter, especially when it's in primetime, which, by the way, it is again this week. The Bears are on primetime 2 straight weeks. Who made that decision? Like, who possibly looked at the Bears roster and said, yeah, back-to-back primetime? It's unbelievable. But Justin Fields is on pace for 800 rushing yards this year, which has only been done by 7 quarterbacks. And those quarterbacks are Lamar, Michael Vick, Randall Cunningham, Russell Wilson, Kyler, and RG3. Pretty good class to be in. The only problem is he doesn't throw the ball. We don't, and I'm not saying he can't, because we don't know, because he doesn't. It's just a pathetic offense. Both sides here are pathetic. I don't want to hear about the Bears or Commanders at all. Like, these are 2 teams where, you couldn't pay me to watch these teams going forward. And by the way, I'll watch them next week. Like I'm gonna watch Monday Night Football. It's like it's just I on my radio show I give out an award every week at the end of the show called the Donkey Brains of the Week. We've talked about this before here. This week I gave that to the NFL schedule makers. How do you put some of these teams on primetime with the frequency that they do? The Denver Broncos, they had primetime in 4 of their first 6 games. How is that possible? And they've got more coming. Like, I just don't understand some of the decisions that the NFL's made, and I understand it's not an easy job to make schedules. Obviously, you got concerts and venues, and you got certain things you got to schedule around, but it's got to be better than this. If Amazon's paying $1 gazillion instead of paying any of their employees to broadcast the NFL on Thursday night, maybe give them good quarterbacks. Maybe give them at least 2 good teams. Like, it's a joke. And the easiest thing about it is, I like a sloppy, bad game if it's on Sunday at 1 o'clock among 9 other games. If you're going to put Bears Commanders on at 1 o'clock, if it's 12-7, I'll get excited at the end for that Mooney play. And, it'll come on Red Zone and it'll be like, oh, what a weird game. Like, give me that. Give it to me. Give me the bad games all at once instead of making me watch one bad game with no interruptions with any other football.
Yeah. Well, speaking of games where teams don't throw the ball, let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons beating the 49ers 28-14. Marcus Mariota going 13 of 14 through the air, only threw 14 passes, but he gets 2 touchdowns. Ace looks like Oregon Marcus Mariota now. He's getting more involved in the running game. He didn't do much on the ground the first 4 weeks, but the last week he led the team in rushing yards. This week he had 50 yards and a touchdown on the ground, 13 of 14 through the air, 2 touchdowns. Like, is this Heisman Trophy Marcus Mariota? They're certainly running a college offense. Arthur Smith, when he actually gets a good roster, the Falcons are going to be so good. He's such a good coach. And on the flip side, what are we measuring against? The 49ers they're just too injured. Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, Emmanuel Mosley, Shavarius Ward, Trey Lance, Trent Smith, like you could go on. They've got so many guys hurt. They're, hopefully they can just stay relevant until they start to get some of these guys back. But there's just not much you can do with that many guys out.
Yeah, there's not much to say here on San Fran. You hit on it there. They're disqualified from being negative. Like their injuries disqualify this from being a negative conversation about the Niners, is what I should say. So hopefully they get better. Hopefully they get healthier. Let's just talk about the Falcons. And you I don't know if you saw my tweets from earlier. I had like a tweet storm about Arthur Smith this morning. I think he's like a top 5 coach in the NFL. Like I think what Arthur Smith's doing, he has $77 million of dead cap counting against the Falcons roster this year.
Wow.
That's unbelievable. That is such an unfathomable number. And this team's 3-3. And this is a team, by the way, Calvin Ridley's suspended for the year. This is a team, by the way, Cordero Patterson got hurt for the next couple weeks last week. And they come out without Patterson, obviously without Ridley, they're without him the whole year. And they come out and they score 28 points and they control this entire game. I mean, when Arthur Smith gets a legitimate roster, when Arthur Smith gets a legitimate quarterback, this is going to be a team that becomes a dynasty. I'm not just like dynasty. When I'm saying dynasty, I'm saying dynasty in terms of this is going to be a team that competes for 5 to 10 years if they ever get a quarterback. I think Arthur Smith is that good of a coach, and he finally seems to be involving Kyle Pitts a little bit more. He had his first touchdown on American soil of his career this week. So I really like everything I'm seeing from the Falcons in terms of what it means. Maybe not for this year. I don't know. Maybe they get to the playoffs this year. Who knows? Like, the NFC's bad. Everyone's bad, and they're 3-3, and they compete every week. There's, by the way, a real reason that I love Atlanta. 6-0 against the spread. They're the only 6-0 team against the spread. They are a true gambling team, the Atlanta Falcons. I love watching this team every week. They're one of my appointment watches, which is funny because they don't have a lot of appointment viewing type players. They're just a fun team to watch because their play calling is that creative. One last thing I'll add on this game. I saw Arthur Smith do one of the smartest things I've ever seen. And AJ Terrell, I think he got kind of tripped up and had a bit of a hamstring injury. So he's trying to run off the field. And I guess Arthur Smith didn't have a sub ready. So he points at the ground as he's running off the field before he steps out of bounds and tells him to get down, go down like you're injured. And Terrell like laid on the ground right before he reached the sideline so they could get the sub in. It's just Arthur Smith is thinking the game on a level like Nathaniel Hackett's not doing that. Like none of these, Cliff Kingsbury's not doing that. Like that's next level thinking. That's like when I went all in on Kenny Pickett because of the fake slide. Like that's next level football IQ right there.
Rob says in the comments here, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Calvin Ridley would be crazy with a decent quarterback next year, and that's so true. And I still wish they would play Ritter because I'd like to know if he's going to be that guy. But it's an exciting team. I've got a trivia question for you because I know you love these obscure trivia things. So only 2 players in NFL history have had 2 passing touchdowns, 1 or less incompletions, 50 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown in the same game. One is Marcus Mariota. Any idea who the other one is?
Kaepernick?
Walter Payton.
Walter Payton. Funny.
So Marcus Mariota and Walter Payton, they're just right there together, same tier.
Yeah. But I agree with what Rob said. My one question wasn't Calvin Ridley supposed to be a free agent next year? Am I wrong there?
I'm not sure, and I'm not sure how that works with the contract getting suspended.
That's what I was just gonna say. Yeah, I'm not sure there. That's one interesting little tidbit. I could be wrong though. He could have a contract. I don't know why I thought that, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the New England Patriots traveling to Cleveland. They beat the Browns. They embarrassed the Browns 38-15. Is Bailey Zappi good? 24-34, 309 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, it was a pretty good day in the office. For the Browns, their defense is just such a big problem. They are 31st in EPA per play. But even worse than that, they are 32nd in EPA per rush at .162. The Giants at 29th are .043. So the Giants, ranked 3 spots ahead of them as the 29th worst rushing defense, is 4 times better than the Browns. Like, they're so bad against the run. Only 3 teams in the NFL, Buffalo, Kansas City, and Philadelphia, have a higher EPA per drop back than the rushing attack that's facing the Browns. It's just phenomenally, unbelievably awful run defense. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I heard some buzz that Stefanski was going to fire the defensive coordinator this week to kind of alleviate some of the buzz that's going his way.
He should have fired him at halftime. Like, that's so bad. It's ridiculous.
I was going to kind of say he should have fired himself. What's your take here on Stefanski? I know he had that, they went to the playoffs and they've had good years with Stefanski. Last year was obviously supremely disappointing. And then this year, I'm not going to call it disappointing because you don't have your quarterback and it's hard to judge them, with Jacoby Brissett. This game they get blown out in, but before going into this game, they were 2-3. All 3 of their losses were, they could have won all 3 of those games. And you can kind of tie it directly to some of the coaching decisions that were made. Then you get blown out at home like this. What's your take on Stefanski? Is he going to make it through the season?
You come into the season with Deshaun Watson as your suspended quarterback, committed to Jacoby Brissett, and you expect the offense to not be great. It's a little hard to evaluate that. The defense, though, is supposed to be good. Now, I think Stefanski probably buys some time just because of the situation this year. But I remain unconvinced that Stefanski is going to pan out there. Lean on your rushing attack. They're asking Jacoby Brissett to do too much, in my opinion. He's not the kind of quarterback that you want to do a lot. You need these You've got a great running game. Use it. I feel like they're putting the ball in Jacoby Brissett's hands just too much for my taste.
Yeah, I agree there. So I don't have much to say on Cleveland. We can move on to Bailey Zappi conversation. But I don't. They
gonna have a QB controversy here?
I think so, but that has much more to do with my opinion on Mac Jones than Bailey Zappi probably. I think Mac Jones is a game manager, and that's always what he was. And last year, I think a lot of people got a little carried away thinking, oh, if he's a game manager now, then what's he going to be when he grows into this system? I think he probably is what he is, Mac Jones. Bailey Zappi is exciting because we don't know what Bailey Zappi is. And coming out of college, Mac Jones, I think we all, me and you at least, were shocked that he was even as good as he was in the NFL because we did think he had such a low ceiling. When it comes to Bailey Zappe's a guy who broke Joe Burrow's touchdown record at Western Kentucky last year. Bailey Zappe's a guy who threw for 5,967 yards at Western Kentucky with 62 touchdowns last year. Like, this is not some guy who put up 30 touchdowns and 4,000 yards at Western Kentucky, and now he's here, and look how scrappy he is. This is a guy who broke pretty much every record he could break while he was at Western Kentucky for the 1 year he was there. And
I will say this. Good things typically happen in New England when your starting quarterback gets hurt and a backup comes into play.
Yeah.
Just say, a day 3 draft pick at that. Just saying, the last time this happened, they built a dynasty.
Yeah, I mean, hey, even Jimmy G came in as a backup, and he look at him, he's made a career for it. So, yeah, I mean, it's just too script. Like, it's too perfect for the Patriots that, of course, they just find this guy. I think at the very least, it's going to cause them to probably trade one of these two guys in the offseason for some value. And I think Bill loves that. And I think Bill takes quarterbacks often. Like, Bill took Jacoby Brissett. Bill took Jimmy G. Bill drafted Mac Jones, obviously, when he needed him. Then Bill drafted Zappe the next year. The next year. Mac was a rookie last year. Bill likes, investing in the backup quarterback position because he saw what happened with Brady. I'm sure that is one part of it, and you always know that you could strike lightning twice there. Maybe they have with Zappe, but at the very least, if you bring in a backup and he comes in and performs, quarterbacks get traded at a premium. So you can go in, cash in on an asset that you took in the 4th round. I think it's genius, and it's kind of why I always defended the Jalen Hurts pick for the Eagles. It's a little it's obviously a 2nd round pick compared to a 4th round pick, but I think quarterback's a position where you should invest even if you have your quarterback. So I think what the Patriots are doing right now with Zappe is amazing.
Yeah. Zappe is the next Brady confirmed, according to Rob here.
I'm in.
Let's do it. Okay, moving on, we have the Jets traveling to Green Bay. They win 27-10. My biggest takeaway of the game here for the Jets is that Quinnen Williams is turning into a superstar. He has 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. He blocked a field goal. He leads defensive tackles in pressure rate and sack rate this season. Meanwhile, Green Bay just looks lost. Like, this is a bad football team. They were held to 278 yards on the day. Their offense is bad. It's 23rd in EPA per play. Their defense that they went all in on is bad. 19th in EPA per play. Their special teams gave up a touchdown. Their offensive and defensive EPA per plays is 1 spot ahead in both categories of the Chicago Bears. Like, they're the Chicago Bears. They're the same level of team. It's time for us to stop acting like they're any better than that.
Yeah, they have no explosiveness. I mean, we can talk about the Packers for an hour if you want, but I don't have a lot of thoughts other than the fact that their offensive line isn't as good as it once was, and Aaron Rodgers isn't as good as he once was, especially with the fact that his receivers are terrible. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's not rocket science to figure out why the Packers are struggling. And honestly, we were all kind of ignorant for thinking that this would just be fine and the Packers would just be the Packers. Like, there was always going to be a drop-off with what they've lost and the lack of what they did. I guess more than the Packers, I think the Jets have to be the conversation here. I don't think I've ever been this shocked to see a team succeed. I don't think I've ever pegged the team as one of the very clear bottom 3 teams in the NFL in my head going into a season, and then have them compete the way that the Jets have. It's amazing. Hats off to Robert Saleh. Hats off to Joe Douglas, who I have killed a lot in the past, but they say you can't fix a team with 1 draft. Joe Douglas might beg to differ. This Jets draft, and we loved it at the time. We thought it was a great draft. We definitely made them the winners on our draft winners and losers podcast that we did. But I don't think anyone thought it would be this good. Sauce Gardner might be a top 5 corner in the NFL right now.
He is. No doubt in my mind. He's already a top 5 corner.
That's unbelievable. And by the way, how I don't know the right word. How justifying is that for us who, when we were watching Sauce, it was just like, how is this guy not like the best corner immediately? Like, how is this guy not going to be an all-pro? Where we won't talk about Kyle Hamilton. He doesn't look very good. We won't talk about that, though. But the Jets, Sauce Gardner obviously is going to be the defensive rookie of the year. Obviously looks like he might be an all-pro. Like he might be a Pro Bowl or whatever you want to throw out there. He might be it. You have Garrett Wilson, who looks like maybe the best rookie receiver from the class. Olave has been good as well, but Wilson looks fantastic. Breece Hall making an early case for the offensive rookie of the year. Maybe they even got a value with Breece Hall in the second round. And I know we kill running back draft picks, but they really needed a running back, and he's come in and they've made him a workhorse right away, which is what you should do. If you're going to invest in a running back highly, whether that be a late first, or a second round pick, run them into the ground right away. Get as much use as you can in a running back in their first rookie contract. So, and they're doing
he's
that
carrying
right
the
now.
load. He had 116 yards on the day. He was supposed to be in a timeshare with Michael Carter. He's dominating that. He's playing great. And so, you talked about fixing the team in one draft. It looks like they've done that, and the crown jewel will be if they can go draft a quarterback next year that is actually an NFL starting quarterback to replace Zach Wilson. They could be a really good football team.
They didn't even have a receiver with 3 catches in this game, and they won 27-10.
Yeah. Zach Wilson, I'm pretty sure isn't it, but this team is looking really good anyways.
Yeah, they're honestly hurting their ability to go and find that quarterback, obviously, with these wins. But Mike LaFleur, he is doing a great job as the offensive coordinator, making a strong head coaching candidacy argument with what he's doing with this limited talent that the Jets have. I would not be surprised if Mike LaFleur is a head coach next year. Matt LaFleur's brother, obviously, for anyone out there who didn't know. So this was Mike LaFleur taking down Matt LaFleur.
Maybe the Packers will hire him to be their head coach.
That would be so insane if the Packers
that would make Thanksgiving really awkward, wouldn't it?
That'd be incredible. That would be absolutely incredible.
Okay, let's roll on here. Jacksonville goes to Indianapolis. They lose 27-34. The Jaguars have. Oh, go ahead. What?
I might refuse to talk about this game. I might.
That's fine.
As someone who is still licking their wounds from a gambling loss in this game, I don't know if I'm emotionally prepared to talk about this game.
I'll carry us through this one then. So, the Jags have owned the Colts recently. They kept them out of the playoffs last season in Week 18. They shut them out a month ago, which, sidebar, can we stop playing our division mates twice in the same month? That's just ridiculous. Like, set the schedule up where your first 3 games and your last 3 games are against divisional opponents. All of the byes are week 4 through 14 or whatever it is. Stop with the 2 times in 4 weeks thing. But that aside, the Jags are up 11 early. Indianapolis scored 29 points on their final 5 drives. And I just want to ask you, I won't make you talk about this game, but I'm trying to ask you, what year is this? Matt Ryan, 58 passing attempts. Earlier this year, we have Joe Flacco with 59 passing attempts. Brady has 2 games with 52 passing attempts. Like, what year are we even in right now?
Let me just hit you with a crazier stat. 40 of the 58 attempts were within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage.
That's crazy.
Watching this game actually set back football. And I know we're talking about like these offenses, what's going on. There's no passing yards. This game was the opposite, and it was a joke. Every defensive coach on the Jacksonville Jaguars staff should be tarred and feathered at the next home game. Like not fired. They should be publicly ashamed for what they did in this game, allowing Matt Ryan to have this many yards and allowing them to come back in this game. And because the Jacksonville offense in this game was fantastic. Fantastic. Trevor Lawrence was near perfect. He could not have been better. I mean, 20 for 22. Obviously, could have gained some more yards. Obviously, didn't get exactly what you'd like from a YPA standpoint there. Could have taken a couple more chances, but they ran the ball really well as well. Like Travis Etienne finally kind of looks exactly like what we were hoping he would look like as a prospect last year, going into this year. I think Travis Etienne is everything that we hoped he would be. So I think that the Jags offense is fantastic. Defense, terrible.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if they can figure it out. They started hot, and they have certainly faltered. But I still think they're a year away. But I think there's a good infrastructure there, at least.
Yeah,
so.
We're going to go rapid fire here a little bit on some of these games because I don't think there's a lot to say on some of the games. But Are we doing Vikings Dolphins next?
Yeah, Vikings Dolphins. Minnesota wins 24-16 for the Dolphins. It's just the quarterback woes. Last week, Skylar Thompson goes into action because Teddy Bridgewater got hurt. This week, the script is flipped. Bridgewater was forced into the game without practicing this week after Thompson injured his thumb. The good news for them is Tua is expected to play next week, so hopefully he's back. Hopefully, the Dolphins can get back going. This should have been it was still a good game because Minnesota's not that good either, but this should have been a higher profile matchup, and it just wasn't because of injury issues for the Dolphins.
The Vikings are 5-1. They haven't had an impressive win since week 1. The NFL's weird. Like I don't know what to say outside of that. Like the Vikings were a team I was high on coming into this. I think you were as well. I think we were both high on the Vikings. We both had them making the playoffs. I think we both had their win total over. And a lot of it was because of the schedule. You look at the schedule and you're like, man, they have a lot of wins on that schedule. But they're even getting helped, obviously, here by the Dolphins starting Skylar Thompson. A lot of people are really, really giving Mike McDaniel a lot of grief over the last couple of weeks. I don't think that that's possible when Tua isn't playing. I basically don't want to hear opinions about this Dolphins team until they have their quarterback, because when they did have their quarterback, they were pretty damn good. So I would like to see what the Tua Tagovailoa Dolphins look like, and it looks like we're going to get that chance this week.
Yeah. Okay, Cincinnati at New Orleans. Cincinnati wins 30-26. How do you handle Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase coming to the Superdome if you are a Louisiana State / New Orleans Saints fan? I don't know how you deal with that on an emotional level, but they put on a show. They connected 7 times for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns, including the game-winning touchdown, a pass that had a completion probability of 32%, and it had 47 yards after the catch over expectations, so kind of a crazy play there. New Orleans goes over the 200-yard rushing mark, and they almost pulled off this win. They're up 26-24 with under 4 minutes left and the ball, but they had to punt. And then Joe Burrow leads that touchdown drive to Jamar Chase. It's got to rip your heart out if you're an LSU and Saints fan.
I had really bad picks yesterday. It was my worst NFL Sunday of the year so far. This was the only game that I absolutely nailed. There was no way that Joe Burrow was going into the Superdome and losing. As you said, that guy, there's something special happens to Joe Burrow when he's inside of the state of Louisiana. He just turns into the best quarterback of all time. And by the way, he looked like it in this game. 28 for 37, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Somehow that doesn't even do justice to how good I thought Joe Burrow was in this game. Like, I thought this was the playoff Joe Burrow in the big moments where we saw him rise above it each and every time. And Joe Burrow did this, by the way, with barely any rushing game. Like, the Bengals barely ran the ball. Joe Mixon got 8 carries. This was all on Joe Burrow. Their defense, I thought, played really poorly. It seemed like the Saints were able to kind of run the ball at will. 6.7 yards per carry here for the Saints. This was all Joe Burrow and Jamar, obviously, as well. And T. Higgins played in this game but put up 0-0. This win goes all towards whatever argument you're going to make towards Joe Burrow still being a top 5 to 10 quarterback in the NFL right now, because he looked as good as anyone I saw on Sunday. And by the way, that comment that you put up there from Rob Smith, keep losing Saints, get that top 5 pick, Eagles. If only there was a podcast with 2 people on it who tried to tell people that the Saints were bad and tried to tell people that we'd get a top 5 to 10 pick. I don't know what that podcast is, but if only there was that podcast. Yeah, right, Chalk Talk.
Right there. Chalk Talk. We were there, and we got receipts to cash in when we get to the end of the year for sure. So, okay, Baltimore travels to New York, and they lose to the Giants, 24-20. For me, Brian Daboll wins Coach of the Year. It's done. Write it down. He's winning Coach of the Year. Like, their 5-1 start is incredible. This is not a talented roster. They trailed 20-10 in the fourth quarter, but they came back, thanks in large part to a Lamar interception and then a fumble on a Kayvon Thibodeau strip sack inside the 2-minute warning. Baltimore blows their third 10-point win of the season, which is just incredible. This is a historically unlucky team, if you want to look at it that way.
We're both Lamar Jackson stans. I mean, we're both Lamar Jackson guys who defend him on a regular basis. But I will just say, we're in a safe space here, right? With Lamar Love, we're in a safe space. He's been terrible for 2 straight weeks. Like, he missed a couple throws in this game that kind of harkened back to rookie Lamar and kind of harkened back to college Lamar, where it's like, man, we've seen him make that throw. I know he can make that throw. What's going on? And we saw that even more, obviously, last week on Sunday Night Football against the Bengals. But people are going to obviously take this game and run with it with the Giants, and that's fine. Obviously, they have every right to be as excited as possible. Daniel Jones looks far better than I ever expected him to look. Saquon looks like Saquon again. And like you said, Brian Daboll might be a top 5 coach in the NFL. The guy is just so good, and he's obviously the coach of the year right now. But this tells me more about the Ravens than the Giants. I think the Ravens are a fake contender. I don't know if people are considering them a contender, but I don't at this point. I think that going into the year, I actually like Baltimore to walk away with that division. Right now, if I had to guess, Baltimore or Cincy, they have the same record. They're both 3-3. I think Cincy's the better team right now, even though Cincy did lose by 1 in Baltimore last week. I think Baltimore's got a lot more I'm concerned about. Mainly, it's this simple. I just said all that to say this. When things were going right for Baltimore over the first couple of weeks, what I was saying on this podcast was, I don't think this team is good. I think Lamar's really good. And right now, Lamar's not playing really good. And the rest of that team is still not good. So that alone, like, I just think they're in a situation that you don't want to be in because they need their QB to be a superhero, to be a contender. And he's not playing like that right now.
Yeah, it's so unfair what they ask Lamar to do.
For sure.
And, I would love to see him in a better situation with better weapons, that sort of thing. But that's not the reality. And so reality is the Ravens are done unless he's able to turn it around. And that's sad that he can't have an off game and then be competitive. If he has an off game, they lose to the Giants.
Yeah, it's that simple. And it's like you said, it's a microcosm of what Baltimore has done to surround Lamar Jackson with talent, which is nothing.
Okay, moving on. Tampa Bay at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh wins this game 20-18. Mitch Trubisky replaced Kenny Pickett, who was concussed, and he led the Steelers to a victory. He goes 9 of 12 passing for 144 yards and a touchdown. He converted a 3rd and 15 and a 3rd and 11 on that final drive to ice the game. Mark, do you want me to tell you what's wrong with Tampa Bay?
What's wrong?
They are thoroughly committed to a running game that does not work.
Mm-hmm.
They are dead last in EPA per rush, and they are 6th in EPA per drop back. And yet, they are 20th in first down passing rate. That 58% of the time, they are choosing to run the ball on first down. They are choosing 58% of the time to be the worst offense in the NFL instead of the 6th best offense in the NFL. You saw it against the Steelers. In the second half, they had 10 first downs. 8 times they chose to run the ball on first down, and they had 1 successful run out of 8. They're just throwing away first downs. They were 21 carries for 62 yards on early downs, 2.9 yards per carry against the Steelers. That's how you lose to a Steelers team that's missing TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Ahkello Witherspoon, Cameron Sutton, Levi Wallace. They're missing 4 starting defensive backs. And you remain committed to being the 32nd best offense in the NFL instead of the 6th best. It's just baffling.
Yeah, Fournette's 3.5 yards per carry right now. And Leonard Fournette is an interesting conversation because there was obviously a time with Fournette where we thought he was elite coming out of college. And even in his early days in Jacksonville, there was a lot of hope. And then he got cut by Jacksonville. And it kind of became widely accepted in the NFL that he was bad. And then he had one amazing year in Tampa Bay. He was amazing last year. And he was obviously really good in that Super Bowl stretch 2 years ago. But he's still Leonard Fournette. He's still not an elite option at the running back position, even if he looked like he was last year. I think we all knew that was a bit of a fluke if you look at some of his success in the past. I do think they're going to figure this out. I think Tampa Bay is going to realize, hey, let's throw the ball. Like, I think it's that simple, and maybe that takes a bye week. I don't necessarily know what it takes. But yeah, the comment here from Rob, do you think they would pass more if Godwin, Evans, and Julio were all 100% healthy, or are they running more because of wide receiver injuries? That could be something. It definitely could be something.
I don't think it is. They've just been so doggedly committed to the run, and it worked when they won the Super Bowl. Not because they were good at it, just because they were so good everywhere else. They're not that good everywhere else, and they still think this is the key to winning games, and it's not. It never was. It's always been Tom Brady and the passing offense and the defense.
It's pretty funny because Leftwich, who calls the plays for Tampa, is an Arians disciple, and I'm pretty sure Leftwich was with Arians when they had Jameis in Tampa. And they just didn't run the ball when they had Jameis. Like, they had Jameis throw it 50 times a game, and he would throw it deep, and they would go crazy with that offense, and they weren't running the ball. And now they have Tom Brady, and they're running the ball. It's very weird. I don't, it's surprising that Tom Brady isn't overruling that. Rob Smith said they just need Antonio Brown back, and I know that's a joke because Antonio Brown's an insane person. Probably belongs in jail in Dubai, if reports will have you believe. But I will just say, I'm pretty sure they were like undefeated with Antonio Brown on the field or something crazy. Like, weren't they like 15-0 in games that he played or something crazy?
Yeah, it was
over
something like that. I don't remember exactly what the stat was, but
I don't remember it either. But not only that, like, I'm pretty sure there were also offensive stats that suggested like when Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Antonio Brown were all on the field, it was like the best offense of all time. Like, I actually, like, I know people don't want to talk about that. I do think there is something to the fact that losing Antonio Brown hurt like that. I know people don't want to talk about his football impact, but look at what he was doing on Tampa. Like, he was pretty good still.
Yeah. Well, speaking of guys that you don't win with or without, this is the first game the Steelers have won without TJ Watt since he was drafted in 2017. So, congrats to the Steelers. They figured out how to win without TJ Watt on the field.
Let's I have an executive decision to make here.
Okay.
I don't think we have anything to say about Panthers-Rams.
I will note, actually, I got one thing to say.
Okay.
Okay, I got two things to say. Robbie Anderson gets in a shouting match with his wide receiver coach on the sideline, and he got sent to the locker room. He was traded to the Cardinals the next day. If you're a Panthers player out there, get in a shouting match on the sideline this weekend with your position coach. Time is running out. You're about to be stuck here the rest of the season. The trade deadline is looming. Get in a shouting match. Get traded. It's that simple.
That's great. Yeah.
The other thing I would say, Matt Ryan through his 29th career, or not Matt Ryan.
Matt Stafford. Too many Matts.
Matt Stafford. Yeah, I put down Matt Ryan. I was like the wrong Matt. Matt Stafford threw his 29th career pick six in this game, which ties Dan Marino for the second most by any player. Wow. The only good thing I'll say on this game for the Rams, Allen Robinson finally got involved. He had 5 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown. So maybe their offense can get some rhythm there.
Or maybe the Panthers just stink.
So speaking of teams that just stink, though, the Cardinals go to Seattle. They lose 9-19. I have another little mini rant that I need to go on here, so I'm going to take a deep breath.
Go off, King.
Seattle's defense averages giving up 30.8 points per game. Coming into this weekend, Arizona scored 9. Not a single touchdown. Why? It's Cliff Kingsbury, man. Cliff has lost 9 of his last 12 games dating back to last season. Arizona, off of an embarrassing end of the season last year, decided to extend Cliff. They decided to extend Steve Keim, the general manager, and Kyler Murray all this offseason. They pushed all their chips into the middle. They said, this is the trio we're going to build our team around. And it's failing. And this roster is constructed of people that they put there. Steve Keim has been the GM since 2013. This is his team. They traded for Marquise Brown. They just traded for Robbie Anderson. They extended Zach Ertz. They went and they got J.J. Watt. These are the guys that they wanted. They intentionally constructed the roster to win right now, and it's not. Keim has been the GM since 2013. Cliff has been the coach since he got fired by Texas Tech in 2018 after going 27-35 in 5 seasons, 3 of which he had Patrick Mahomes under center for. Kyler is the quarterback. He's in the 4th year of his deal. Can you put blame on him? Sure, but he's the quarterback that you chose. You abandoned Josh Rosen, the 10th overall pick after one season. Like this team, this front office is a disaster. People have to get fired. You cannot keep this trio together, and your quarterback outweighs your general manager and your GM. Cliff and Kime, they got to go.
Yeah, I totally agree. And by the way, I will just say, I've never thought about this before. What an incredible move by Steve Kime to elongate his window and to keep his seat from being hot than to move on from Josh Rosen in a year. You can't get fired for picking the wrong QB if you go and pick another QB right away. Like that. Yep. That's galaxy brain stuff from Steve Kime. Good job by Steve to keep his job there. That's really impressive.
And I got bad news for the Cardinals too, trying to get back on track. The Call of Duty campaign releases on Thursday. So Kyler's done. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, you're right there. I bet the over in this game.
Oh gosh. And that would have seemed to be a good bet. But
Seattle was an auto bet on the over this year before this.
Yeah, and Geno struggled in this game a little bit, especially downfield. He was 1 of 6 on passes over 10 yards. He's been good in those scenarios this season. But Kenneth Walker's coming on strong. 88 yards last week, 97 yards this week. But the real rookie we got to talk about is Tariq Woolen. You and I gassed Tariq Woolen up in the pre-draft process, said, how do you not bet on the traits? He just had his 4th consecutive game with an interception, and he had a fumble recovery. Like, he's playing incredible for Seattle.
Yeah, he's the definition of why the combine exists. Like, people like him shine in the combine and then obviously go on to have incredible careers. The funny thing here about this game, Arizona moved the ball. Like, they got down the field. They just stalled out. They're terrible in the red zone, and they refuse to take field goals when they should. They refuse to go for it when they should. It's like Cliff Kingsbury has an analytics guy telling him what decision to make, and he's like, I messed up this joke. My bad. I got things on my mind. The Phillies and Sixers are coming up, but it's like the analytics guy did something unseemly to Cliff Kingsbury's family or wife or something, and it's like, oh, whatever this guy tells me now, I'm doing the opposite. Like, it's like, oh, you should go for it. You've got like a 3% edge to go for it. He's like, I'm kicking the field goal. You should kick the field goal. We need to tie the game 9-9 here. I'm going for it. Like, and when they go for it, it's always a hilariously bad call. I can't tell you how, and this might go on Kyler, like you said, the blame might go on Kyler. I can't tell you how many times I've seen Kyler Murray throw deep on 4th and 2. Or 4th and 3. Throw the ball like 20 yards down the field. It's like, what are we doing? It's 4th and 2. Run the ball. Like, whatever. We can't talk more about this game. We have to get to the last game here before we get out of here.
Yeah, Rob says, got to run. Great show. Thanks for joining, Rob. Hope we see you back here next week. Always enjoy interacting with y'all in the comments. We have 2 games left. The Bills and the Chiefs. Right. Denver and the Chargers. So, the Bills. They win 24-20 at Arrowhead against the Chiefs. They scored to take the lead with a little over a minute left, and you had to be thinking, here we go again, right? But the Bills' defense gets the stop with a Von Miller pressure leading to a game-sealing interception. That's what you paid him for. Miller has 5 pressures and 2 sacks in the game. Josh Allen goes 27 of 40 for 329 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also hurdled a guy. He had a run of 13 straight completions and a run of 7 straight incompletions in the second quarter. So it was a game of streaks. Patrick Mahomes threw an interception on the first play, or not the first play, the first drive, and then the last play of the game. And outside of that, he played nearly flawless football, 338 yards and 2 touchdowns. My takeaway from this game, it doesn't matter. The Bills dismantled the Chiefs last year in the regular season. It shows these teams are just elite. Like, you watch this game, and even sitting here, as an Eagles podcast, watching the 6-0 Eagles, you just watch the Bills and Chiefs, and you get a feeling you're playing for the right to lose to one of them in a Super Bowl. These 2 teams are just on a different level. And teams like the Eagles are building a roster. They're catching up. I just don't know that they're there yet.
I think the Eagles might be the only team that's there with those 2. Outside of that, and I don't disagree with your point at all. These 2 teams are the 2 best teams probably, and I think the Eagles are really the only one that has an argument to be included with these 2 teams. Outside of the Eagles, who's the 4th team?
I could not tell you who the fourth best team in the NFL is. I have a clear tier 1 of the Bills and the Chiefs, a slightly behind them in tier 2 the Eagles, and then outside of that, I don't even know who's good. I have no idea who else is good in the NFL.
Yeah, I think Tampa and San Fran are 3-3. I think at this point, it's hard to include either of them. Like, definitely can't include the Rams. Like, it's really, really hard. The Chargers are 4-2. Me and you picked the Chargers to win the Super Bowl. I don't think either of us are even close to including them in this conversation. Like, there are levels to this, as I said earlier, and the Bills and the Chiefs and maybe the Eagles are the level right now. I think they're very clearly the 3 best teams. And yeah, like you said, I don't think this game matters. Like, I think Mahomes played perfect outside of the first and last throw that he made, or the first throw on the first drive and then the last throw that he made. I thought he was perfect outside of that. If we're going to, outside of the interceptions that he threw, if we're going to say what the difference in the game is, Buffalo could run the ball. Kansas City couldn't. Kansas City couldn't even think about running the ball here. Clyde has 9 carries for 33 yards, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is like fetch. Can we please stop making Clyde Edwards-Helaire happen? Can we please just move on, Kansas City? He's not what we thought he was.
And that's the thing that makes me think that you play a 10-game series, the Eagles can't compete, 7-game series, whatever. In one game, the Eagles can run the football on a level that nobody else in the NFL, but certainly not either of these teams can. And so I do think that gives you a chance in a one-game setting that you can go out and beat one of these teams just because they can struggle. When you're limiting the explosive plays, when you're doing all those things, they can't run the ball and make you pay like the Eagles can. And so it feels like 2012 and we're talking about running the football, but it's becoming an issue for both of these teams.
Yeah, and at least Buffalo was able to step up here and get the job done in terms of running the ball. Singletary gets 5 yards per carry, 85 yards, and they fed him. I mean, they gave him 17 carries. Allen ran the ball 12 times. Wasn't very efficient in those runs, but they ran the ball a ton here in terms of what Buffalo was able to do. They ran the ball almost double the amount that Kansas City ran the ball. So definitely something to keep track of if they ever play again. That'll be an interesting subplot. And by the way, if they play again, I'm probably going to bet Kansas City again. Like, I still believe when it comes to nut cutting time, I'm going to believe in Patrick Mahomes above everybody. So yeah, there it is.
All right, moving on to Monday Night Football. The Denver Broncos, again in prime time. They lose again, 19-16 to the Chargers, and it's in overtime. I just got to say, kickers are people too, and Dustin Hopkins gets the game ball. He injures his hamstring on the first kick of the night, an extra point early in the game. He hit 4 field goals after the game to propel the Chargers to the win in overtime. They weren't long field goals, but on at least 2 of them, it might have been more, I can't remember, he went to the ground after the kick in pain with his hamstring, and he continued to go out there because the Chargers' offense is inept, and he continued to make field goals, and he brought home the game for the Chargers. So Dustin Hopkins, you do something like that, and you're a kicker, you get a shout-out on this podcast. I give him the game ball.
Yeah, I mean, he absolutely deserves it. By the way, what's Brandon Staley doing? Making his kicker, who's injured, kick 4 times. I know it worked out, but what are you doing? I feel like that's something you should avoid. I believe I don't have much to say on this game. I bet the Chargers and fell asleep is what I did. Fell asleep at halftime. Couldn't make it through halftime. I'll be quite honest. And didn't have a chance to catch up on it too much today. I think you have a bit of a Brandon Staley rant that you wanted to unload.
It's not even a rant anymore. I just can't wait for the Chargers to get a real coach. Like his little videos he made last year and his trendy analytics stuff that he doesn't even use anymore. I'm done with Brandon Staley. I think he was a product of having some elite players on his defense with the Rams. Like, what are we doing? Justin Herbert threw 57 passes in this game, 4.2 yards per attempt. You've got one of the best deep passing quarterbacks in the NFL. We can't push the ball downfield. Our offense exists to get to third down. Did you know you can try to get a first down on first down or second down? Because the Chargers don't. They just run curls every play, 4-yard hitches, whatever, same play. Herbert, you just read this. You're a good quarterback. Make those pre-snap reads and fit it into the tiny windows you're afforded, because we don't have anybody that can stretch the field. We don't design our offense to help you out. It's just gross. I'm done with Brandon Staley. I've been done with him since he put Herbert out on the field injured in the fourth quarter of a blowout and kept dropping him back. But they got to move on. Imagine how good they will be if Sean Payton is their head coach next year.
Woo, I like that. I will say I think they're missing Keenan Allen a lot. They're missing a lot of the guys that are hurt. They are extremely injured. So even with us killing Staley, with us saying that they're nowhere near what we expected, you have to say 4-2 coming out of this, how injured they've been in their first 6 weeks. 4-2 is a massive, massive success.
Yeah, for sure. And they're going to hang in there, and hopefully they'll get healthy, and hopefully Brandon Staley will stop coaching like a moron and get back to the way he coached last year. It would be nice. Maybe they'll figure out how to run an offense for Justin Herbert. But this was such a brutal game to watch. In the first half, it didn't look like it was going to be. Russell Wilson started the game hot. He faded down the stretch. J.C. Jackson was benched for the second half in this game. He played really bad.
Mm-hmm.
But Wilson, in the second half, goes 3 of 11 in the second half and overtime. The Broncos had negative 13 net passing yards after halftime. And even just watch the overtime. 5 combined possessions in overtime for 16 yards and 0 first downs. But a muffed punt prevented a tie. Literally a punt was the biggest play of overtime. There were 240 penalty yards in this game. It was just a sloppy, sloppy game.
Yeah, it was, from what I saw of it, the first half was terrible. It's just, Denver, have I ever been more right on anything in the world than I was about this Denver Broncos trade for Russell Wilson and the roster as a whole? Like, this front, I've said this line so many times now that it makes myself cringe hearing it. But this front office wrote a check that their roster couldn't cash when they traded for Russell Wilson. Their roster was not good enough to go and make the all-in trade that they made. And I'm sorry that I dropped off there. I had the laptop died, so I had to switch over to the phone here. So that's why we've got a little bit less of me on the screen.
Actually, I wasn't seeing you before. It was just a black screen, so I'm not sure. I don't know if the users were seeing you or not, because there's some funky things going on in StreamYard today. So hopefully you guys have heard us fine the whole way. Hopefully you've seen Mark too. This is the first time I've seen Mark since he first popped in. So, so do you have any final thoughts? Oh, there you went. You're black again.
Oh,
nope, you're back. Good. There we go. All right. Well, Mark, now that I can see you, do you have any final thoughts you want to get off your chest?
Final thoughts. I guess it's just, there's nothing, as a gambling guy, because that's always what I'm going to focus on. I've had an incredible year in college football. I stink in the NFL. I don't know what's going on week to week in the NFL. And to excuse myself, I'm going to say it's not my fault. I'm going to say the reason we're seeing so much unpredictability, because there's no good teams. There's no bad teams. And I'd like for there to start being good teams and for there to start being bad teams, so I can get back to making money gambling on the NFL. That's my final thought.
Yeah, I haven't bet on a game since the Colts beat the Chiefs. I'm done. I don't even know who's good anymore.
Yeah, that was a rough one. That was a big one for me as well.
Well, for my final thought, I will wish the best of luck to the Flyers in their playoff game tonight.
Oh, you're a scumbag.
And to the Phillies in their first basketball game of the year tonight. I'll wish luck to all of the other Philadelphia sports teams and the sports that don't matter. And yes, I know it's the 76ers and the Phillies. I'm just messing with you, but it's an exciting, as Nick Sirianni would say, it's an exciting time to be a Philadelphia fan. And I guess I'm not a Philadelphia fan, I'm an Eagles fan, but that excitement's still contagious. So you guys go light up my Twitter timeline with basketball and baseball clips that I probably won't watch, but I'm still happy for you.
The Sixers will make a touchdown and the Phillies will get a slam dunk.
Yeah, exactly. A power play. I don't know. Something will happen. It'll be great. So.
Yeah, the Phillies are going to Pico power play.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us for episode 76 of Chalk Talk at a little abnormal time, a little earlier on a Tuesday, out of respect for the hockey playoffs tonight, the soccer ball, whatever it is going on. So if you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. If you have not given us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, we would really appreciate that. That helps us get the podcast out there for more people. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at _TPL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. So from me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we will see you guys next time.